does everyone know what an executive order is? Has everyone heard of an executive order? Right? You've heard of them, okay? The executive orders have been in place since Washington. Executive order is constitutional, okay? But only in the context of an already existing law that Congress has already established within the Constitution. So as long as the president is operating within that framework, it's good, it's constitutional. The problem is now presidents have increasingly been using the executive order to circumvent or to get around the Constitution. That is not constitutional. And so as long as the president is operating within already an established law within the Constitution, he can execute an executive order pertaining to that. But outside that, no. An executive order can look like, here, since we said some of us have heard of it, I'll give an example of an executive order. This is something recent. There was an executive order during COVID. There was the emergency pandemic order, okay? And basically, it gave the government the ability to surveil us, right? The HIPAA laws, pertaining to our privacy of medical information about us. That's always been hidden. That's always been it's a law to protect us, to keep people from knowing our personal information regarding our health. Well, that order wiped that clean. Think about it. We had people that were finding out other people weren't being vaccinated and putting it on social media. Not only was the government collecting the data on it, but they were making it public for everybody to know. Even people outside, not that that would be legal, but that made it even worse when, half the country knew that when you were not or were vaccinated. So that is an example. Now, he had to, Biden, just a few months ago, just released the executive order. And see, the reason why he had that in for such a long time was so that they can, continue to do the monitoring, continue to do the data, continue to, was able to put appointments in that because it was considered a state of emergency. And so that's a prime example of something that has happened today. You wonder, how did he do all those things that he did? It was through the executive order. Now, we can hold that person accountable and make sure. Well, see, it's not just us. We have to hold our elected officials accountable to hold the president. Because remember, the whole three branches of government depend on checks and balance. They have to keep each other in check and in balance. And whenever there's a shift in power, which, let me tell you, shift in power is not a bad thing. People are in government because they're ambitious. Think about it. When you elect an official, do you want a guy who laid back, not too worried about things, just, if it happens, it happens. No, you want a go-getter, you want a leader, you want someone who has integrity, but you want them to have ambition, to go and get it. Well, right now you have kind of it's off where the president and the executive branch right now have the ambition, right? And then one party over another party has a little bit more ambition, right? You can say the conservative movement they're starting to wake up, but they've been very, Pastor called it, there's almost like a Jezebel spirit, an Ahab spirit, where very passive, regarding conflict. And so, but here you have it. But you'll see the kind of ebb and flow of the kind of switch in power, but that's good. But we have to be a part of that. We have to be monitoring that. We have to be watching it and holding people accountable. And so when someone takes an overstep, we push here so they can put that branch in check, to bring them down or bring them up. That's how that takes place. John Adams said that faithfully executing the laws would make us a nation of laws and not of men. Nation of laws and not of men. So, when that faithfully executed, the president, he's referring to the president. If the president is doing his job and he's faithfully executing the laws, we'll be a nation of laws and not of men. Ask for a little participation. When you hear that, what do you think? That we rather be a nation of laws rather than a nation of men.
Like men wanting power, rising up, wanting power.
Because we talked about it before, the heart is evil and no one can know it. These men knew that. Remember, yet in context, they came from the oppressive leadership of the king, of the crown, of rulers, of lords. They understood all that. And so that's why they have the laws to put everyone in check instead of having the ambition. It's one thing, they wanted ambition for the people that these people were elected to represent, not individual ambition, not a power grab. Okay? So, that's good. Here he said it in John Adams. He said, in the interest of the people is one thing. It is the public interest. And where the public interest governs, it is a government of laws and not of men. So he just kind of explains that, make sure you understand. And here it is. The interest of a king or a party is another thing. It is a private interest. And where private interest governs, it is a nation of men and not of laws. So you hit it right on the head. You hit it right on the head. Yeah, that's where we are right now. Exactly right. So, in public officials, we should look for people who will set themselves aside and enforce the will of the people. So set themselves aside and enforce the will of the people. So the number one characteristic, to set yourself aside, and let's talk about kind of the biblical view, how we kind of talk and understand what it is to set yourself aside. What kind of person is that in the church, in our church? Someone who sets themselves aside. Pastor? I'm thinking a little bit more general, but yes, the exact. No, it's the same. He's a servant, right? A servant, right? Whether it's a pastor, teacher, tech, usher, greeter, you name it. People work in the Hebrews, they're servants. They set themselves aside. They don't think too much of themselves that I should be doing something better. No. They have a servant's attitude. So when we look for people to represent us, we want to see a servant. People who put the goodwill of the people first above their own interests. Okay. So the president, and so there's president, more than any other entity, is the one who decides whether we are a government of laws or a government of men. We kind of touched on it earlier. The president is really, he is the representative, or should be the expression, the outward expression, or the fruit of our country. Think about it.
You'd be on TV teaching this nationally.
I didn't. No, I don't. We got some better teachers. But yes, it's good stuff, right? So, see, it's easy. My dad used to tell me, people pointing out problems come a dime a dozen. Anybody. I mean, someone with a very limited understanding or capability mentally can point out a problem. But there's only a select few who can point out a solution. Okay? So the reason I bring this up is it's important, right? Yes, we can recognize when we have a poor leader. But we have to be more than that. We have to be, okay, we got ourselves in this situation, we got to get ourselves out. We got to problem solve. We got to figure out what we got to do, right? We can't just point at the problem and, hope it gets better. No, it doesn't work that way. Remember, participation is a necessary part of the framework of our government. On the second page, okay, the Electoral College. This is a very popular subject. Electoral College is a way for the people to have a voice and the states to have a voice in the election of the president. Okay. Well, here, let's talk about this for a second here. So, has anyone in here wondered why there's like this point system where you have the votes, right? They count the states, and then based on the states, they get like this number, right? Even though you have, for instance, Donald Trump in the last election had the most votes in history for a president. He won the popular vote, but he didn't win. Okay? It's happened before. Okay? The founders created the Constitution so there would not be a popular vote. Okay? Because, think of it, and we'll touch on this later, but just so, because I'm going to explain this, I need to bring it all in. They understood that the cities would, first, that if all the cities voted for a certain way, they would overrule the people who lived in the country. And that was not a true representation of the country. To have a true representation, you couldn't use a popular vote because the cities will overwhelm the rural. And so a way to get around that, they said, okay, it's broken down into counties, right? And then based on that, you have the rural, city, and who determines who wins, right? And then each state gets a certain number of electoral votes towards the total amount. Whoever has the most wins. So that's how it works. The reason why is because they believed that the cities had some serious moral issues. Okay? And that they use terms like abscess. They considered a city like to have an abscess to a human body. Right? They were void of moral issues. And so to keep that in balance, they said, no, this is a way to get around that. It's so that the people did have a voice, but the states also had the voice. So if for instance, we happen to live in Texas. Texas is a red state. But if you look at Dallas, Austin, San Antonio, Houston, those major areas, those are blue counties. Those represent millions of votes. But the state is red. So that's how we are represented, as a red. So, anyone have any questions about that? No? Okay. Okay, so the founders rejected, I'm sorry. Do you need a worksheet? Do you need a worksheet? Yep. Sorry, I just looked up and I saw you. We're on page 2. I believe I'm on the second question down on page 2. The founders rejected having a president elected by popular vote. So I talked about that because it was because the most populous areas would outvote the more rural areas. The founding fathers used the electoral college to strike a balance that will require a winner to have both a popular vote of the people and a sufficient vote of the people. So popular vote and sufficient vote. Yeah, the second one where the founding fathers used the electoral college to strike a balance that would require the winner to have both a popular vote and a sufficient vote. I think I kind of wrote that answer on at the end. Sorry about that. In a popular vote scenario, the major deciders of the presidency would be big cities. Big cities. Oh, let me read this. This is kind of what I was talking about earlier. This is the quote. This is what Thomas Jefferson wrote to Benjamin Rush. He says, "I view great cities as a pestilence of the morals, the health, and the liberties of man." And then Benjamin Rush responded to that letter. He says, "I agree with you in your opinion of cities." Cowper, the poet, very happily expressed our ideas of them compared with the country. God made the country, man made cities. I consider them in the same light as I do abscess on the human body, as reservoirs of all the impurities of the community. I mean, we look in major cities. This is over 200 years ago. These guys saw it then, and it's here today. Again, we're talking about principles, long-standing principles. That man never changes without the help of God, right? Pure democracy, here it is. Pure democracy cannot subsist long, nor be carried far into departments of state. It is very subject to comprise the madness of popular rage. John Witherspoon, excuse me. Okay. In this last election, did any of you hear about the preservation of democracy in the ads? Almost every single ad. They always ended it as, you want to preserve democracy. You want to preserve democracy. Defend democracy. The fear of democracy could end. Our Constitution is founded on a republic. Democracy has always ended very poorly wherever it existed. Democracy often, okay, in every instance, and this is a historical fact, in every instance where democracy is truly instilled, it was merely a means to allow people to destroy themselves and the government come in and say, I'll take care of you. Because a government that's without God, void of God, just given to the vices of men, will fail. And see, a lot of the problems that we see today, you ever notice the very people who actually created the problem are the ones say, hey, I've got a solution to fix it, and it usually ends with the destruction of your liberties. But we got to preserve democracy. I've got to let you continue to destroy yourself so that when I come and have a way to save you without God, you'll let me. You'll vote for me. Venezuela is a prime example. These people voted their freedoms away. Excuse me. Did you need a worksheet? You're good? Okay. You're welcome. Okay, so supporters of national popular vote want pure democracy. Supporters of a national popular vote want pure democracy rather than a constitutional republic. So when you hear a push for a national popular vote, these people essentially want to destroy what little we have left of the Constitution to take complete control. So when you hear pure democracy, defend democracy, popular vote, national popular vote, it's unconstitutional. Okay, here we go. So remember, democracy never lasts long. It soon wastes, exhausts, and murders itself. There has never was a democracy yet that did not commit suicide. John Adams. A simple democracy is one of the greatest evils. A democracy is a mobocracy. Benjamin Rush. Let me ask you something. The mob. Where is there a place today where we see the mob take control?
Seattle and Portland.
Those are two specific areas that the mob has taken over control. But what helps feed that? Think of tech. Social media. Social media is the poster child for mobocracy. Yeah. Mainstream news, right? The legacy news, all the major news outlets, absolutely. They feed it. They feed the fuel. They almost bring with the help of the government, state-run media, directing the people, keeping the people's attention there. It's one thing because, people will use social media, they'll talk about stuff, and those things media will kind of keep things lingering and pushing and bringing people to a place of mob mentality. But as we talk about democracy, that is essential. Let me say something. Is it easy to manipulate people to coming into a mob? Yeah. That's why they like it. Leaders. They can push people. And then when things get crazy, they say, well, I've got a solution to fix it. And they freely hand over their liberties. It's good. Okay, so here we go. The last section 3 of the 25th Amendment is a process by which the president declares he or she unable to fulfill the duties of the presidency. So the 25th Amendment, Section 3, it talks about the president has the authority to declare himself unfit. Say, look, I can't do it. Health, emotional, whatever the case may be, that is his constitutional right. Now here's the other part. Section 4 of the 25th Amendment is a process by which the vice president and the majority of the cabinet declare the president is able to fulfill the duties of the presidency. So in this case, the president is either unwilling or unable to declare he or she is unable to faithfully execute the laws of the Constitution. And in this case, they can get around it. When was the 25th Amendment invoked under Section 4? Never. Only in the movies. Only in the movies. To this day, the only time the 25th Amendment was invoked under Section 3 was once by President Reagan, and then twice by President George W. Bush. That's the 43rd president. The Constitution requires Congress to assemble at least once every year. At least once every year. During the days of the Founding Fathers, recesses could last for months. Recesses could last for months. I'm going to go through these real quick, and then I'll bring it all home. Recess. Now this is important. This is kind of going to our discussion next. Recess appointments were designed to deal with emergency situations that occur during a recess. Emergency situation that occurs during a recess. Not to sneak through an appointment that the Senate had refused to approve while it was in session. Okay, so remember, this is another loophole that in this Article 2, the executive branch, the president, and the the cabinet, have utilized to push an appointee by the administration that cannot get through the Senate. And so what they would do is they would call for a recess. And during that recess, the president would say, well, you're out of recess. I got an emergency here. I got to, we're on our time crunch, And what they would do is they would say, this appointee has to deal with this situation that it's at hand, and it's considered an emergency. So it's a loophole how the administration can push appointees through outside the approval of the Senate. Now, something very interesting, the only, this actually happened through the Obama administration, when he was pushing appointees through left and right. Someone did an op-ed and said that Congress is the only entity that is authorized to call for a recess, and that if they either do it themselves or the administration does it and then puts the appointee, they called them on it and said, you can't do that. Only the House is authorized to do the recess. See, that is exactly the type of leadership they were looking for. People who know the Constitution and will hold our elected officials accountable. The president has the power to make appointments or even create czars within the agency that Congress created by law. So again, law is the answer. Appointees, leadership, czars, people that can operate with authority to help something move more efficiently within a branch of government. He or she can do that just like the faithful execution or the executive power. As long as the law is established within the Constitution, they can do that. They can make things go faster. That's kind of, when they see a problem, as long as the law is already established, everything's good, it's constitutional, then you can do things to help facilitate what that was in place to take care of. Section 1, or Article 1, this is kind of going back to Congress, but this is kind of what we're talking about here. Article 1, Section 5 requires the approval from the other chamber of either the House or the Senate to adjourn for more than 3 days during a session. Remember, I talked about that. That is a reference point that the article had placed when they noticed that they were adjourning, and these appointments are getting pushed through during those adjourned pieces of time without the approval of the House of Senate. The practice of issuing executive orders started with President Washington. We talked about it before. Do you remember what that was? The executive order that Washington had? It was part of the establishing the Navy, kicking that high gear because of the terrorists. Anyway, that was a side note. We talked about this earlier. Executive orders are constitutional as long as they are executing a law that Congress has actually passed. So executive orders are constitutional as long as they are executing a law that Congress has passed. The founders believed that the foundation, this is very good, the foundation of oaths was in being more afraid of God than of following the oath. So the founders believed that the foundation of oaths was in being more afraid of God than of following the oath. Okay. What was holding all these men responsible for their duty in, first fighting for their freedom, their liberties, defending their freedom and liberties, and constructing a constitution of preserving freedom of liberties was this oath. And the oath was to God. Not okay. So if we have a true fear of God, that's what keeps us. A reverence of God. That's what keeps us from sinning. That's what keeps us, our moral compass, pointed in the right direction. Our fear of God, not of man, not of a broken relationship, not of financial loss. It's God, because no matter if you find out about my failures, my iniquities, my sin or not, or I go my whole life escaping anyone from finding out about my sin or iniquities. Who knows? God. I'm held account to him, and whether I spend eternity to him or not is based on that. And that's what these guys were saying, that the oath was fear of God. That's what's going to keep them. That's what puts their own agendas aside, that gives them the servant's heart to do the will of the people. That's what directed these men. Okay, so in 1776, Pennsylvania Constitution, written by Benjamin Franklin, barred anyone from holding office, hear me, barred anyone from holding office unless they believed in a future state of rewards and punishments. What is he saying there? Rewards, and punishments. You believe in God, and then what happens on the day of judgment? He will give you a crown of glory of all the things you did well. Well done, good and faithful servant. Or he'll cast you out, where there'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Rewards or punishments. It's in the Constitution. Benjamin said here, very specifically, he says, barred anyone from holding office unless they believed in this ultimate judgment. That if the people won't keep you in line, if finances won't keep you in line, God will keep you in line. If God doesn't keep you in line, you have no place in public officiating. No place. James Madison said that an oath is the strongest of the religious ties. Religious ties, the strongest of religious ties. The last page. Okay, let me get through these answers real quick because we're almost done here. Okay, John Quincy Adams turned down an appointment to the U.S. Supreme Court because he was negotiating the Treaty of Ghent to the end, it says was, but war should be, well, it's a typo, sorry about that. War of 1812. Okay, so John Quincy Adams was selected, appointed, approved to be on the Supreme Court. He wasn't even in the country because he was so highly thought of. He was considered a very bright, legal mind, just man, believer in God, had a fear of God. He was in a foreign country trying to end a war. And what he did was he turned that appointment down because his duty to a country was more important to him than his own ambition of becoming a Supreme Court judge. That's the kind of people we need. Set aside their own personal ambitions and to seek to serve the American people, upholding the Constitution. Okay, so if you place the Constitution within a secular atmosphere, it will die because it was not designed to function in that atmosphere. Okay. Very simply put, if we go to the moon, we try to breathe air on the moon, it's not going to happen, we die. We can't live in that atmosphere. We're incapable of doing that. Okay? When you remove God from the framework, it dies. The very lifeblood, I mean literally, Jesus' blood keeps it alive. It brings it all together. It holds it all together. So this idea that the Constitution is a secular document is flat out lie. All throughout this class, remember, this class is talking about God, a government. God established it. God establishes authorities. We created this government with the framework with God that created above everything else. Everything comes below it. The people who designed it and put the framework in place believed it. They wanted to hold other people accountable for it. They said it was part of your oath, not to man, but to God. According to Scripture, this is the next question. Our elected officials should be able men who fear God. At which point the oaths will mean something. So our elected officials should be able men who fear God. At which point the oaths mean something. The founders wanted two branches of government involved in appointments as a check and balance on presidential favoritism. Check and balance. Check and balance. Some of the founders who wrote who were particularly influential on the Constitution were Roger Sherman, George Washington, Charles Pinckney, and James Madison. So it was Sherman, Washington, Pinckney, and Madison. And I want to end with this real quick and see if we can get a couple questions. If the president alone was vested with the power of appointing all officials and left to select a council for himself, he would be liable to be deceived by flatterers and pretenders of patriotism who have no motive but their own self-seeking profit for gain. Excuse me. Roger Sherman, Declaration of Opinion sign and Constitution signer. Okay, so questions? Got 2 minutes. Anybody? It could be something we missed. Have a question about something you missed? No, you got one question? No? Come on. How about over here? Back of the class. Here, newcomer, you have a question? Oh, that's fine. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Mark?
It seems like that's all we have these days is flatterers and pretenders to patriotism.
Very good point.
That's the rule, not the exception.
So you're saying that these guys, they knew what they were talking about when they, yeah. So what their ideas, the American experiment, it's not dated, right? I mean, it's not useful today because we're more advanced.
Yeah, the framers of the Constitution did not have a crystal ball, but they understood people, and they knew that people do not change.
How do you think they knew about people? The Bible, the king, rulers, oppressors of liberty. They knew it. Just like when you have people come here, I talked about the son of the pastor that defected from, or was a refugee from North Korea, right? He came and he was the pastor that would not bend the knee to Gavin Newsom's ban on church gatherings. Not only did not only did the Supreme Court say that it was unconstitutional what Gavin Newsom did, but they also made him pay $100 million back. He knew. When people come from an authoritarian government, they know. See, we kind of, remember we talked about erosion, right? We're at the beach all the time, and erosion takes place every day. We don't see it because it's a little at a time. It's unnoticeable. But when you leave and come back after 10 years and you've lost 20 feet of your land, you see it. When people come from other countries, from communism, from socialism, any type of authoritarian government, it's obvious to them. We're the ones that are asleep. Okay, 10 o'clock. Thank you, Father. We just thank you, Father. We thank you for sending your Son, your precious Son who died on the cross so that we would have life with you, freedom. The liberties that we enjoy are bestowed upon us from you, and that no man and no government can take them away from us. That we continue to search the scriptures as we learn about the framework of our Constitution, that these people, these children of liberty, will be strengthened and encouraged to make a difference in the world. In Jesus' name, amen.